Hey everybody, it is the Angry Honey Badger, and welcome to Season 6 Mastery Pages. These are going to be generic pages or just good setups for about 90% of champions that you play. There will be some special cases where you'll want maybe a little bit of an odd page depending on who the champion may be, but for the most part, this should get you covered for Season 6. Now, any of the parts of these mastery pages you might have questions about, you can obviously leave them down below in the comments, but I'm going to try to hit a few points where you might be wondering why something is where it is. I'm going to go over certain parts a little bit quicker because we're going to cover 11 pages, but besides that, we should be good to go. So let's kick things off by looking at what I call the ADC generic page. Now, ADC generic is what we will just be considering for all AD carries, and we'll talk about the few little differences you could take, and then we'll talk about one other ADC page currently for two others that you might want to work on or get. So, ADC generic. First off, obviously we're going to take that attack speed. This is the first one that we'll talk about is double-edged sword versus feast. Feast is always going to be a beneficial mastery point. It's only 100% positive, and as someone who is going to be killing units in lane, such as minions, you'll be getting this health back every 20 seconds. This is good health per 5 if you look at it that way. So, a very strong thing to have, and always a positive impact. The problem with double-edged sword as a carry range, 2% damage is honestly not a lot of damage, and to them be taking 2% damage from all sources that are dealing damage to you, that's kind of a very negative aspect. Obviously, if you're insanely good and you're always perfect at positioning and never take damage, then yes, this would be better in theory. But for laning and for safety and just for generic use, Feast is a better mastery. Then we're going to take our natural talent. We're going to be taking Oppressor because any time in lane we'll be probably utilizing this way more than Bounty Hunter. Even if we get the 2% of Bounty Hunter from killing the bot lane, yes, that would be good, and we have the potential to stacking this up to 5% damage as the game goes on. But most of the time, you might not be killing 5 or all 5 champions on the enemy team, maybe only 3, maybe only 4, just depends. If you are a late game champion, I can see this being more viable. If you're a Kog'Maw, if you are a Jinx and you really become a hyper carry, Bounty Hunter could be better, but once again, Oppressor is safer when it comes to actually getting the damage because slows, stares, taunts, and all that other stuff is going to be happening in teamfights. You will be able to utilize the 2.5 increase in damage. Bounty Hunter, it's not a guarantee, therefore it makes it a riskier pick, similar to a double-edged sword. Now when it comes down to the next part, we're going to take Battering Blows, and then we're going to be taking Fervor of Battle. Now before we jump any further into these, I want to talk about all 3 of these at the bottom real quick, because I think they're all very impactful in many different ways. First, we'll talk about Fervor of Battle. Now, your basic attacks and your spells grant you a stack of Fervor for 5 seconds, with a maximum of 10 stacks. Each stack will be obviously from 1 to 8 bonus damage, so this means that 10 stacks you'll have anywhere from 10 to 80 at max stacks, which is kind of a lot of damage if you think about it. 80 bonus attack damage is a crazy amount of attack damage. That's more than what Infinity Edge gives you. So late game, that's gonna make crits enormous. Now, if you don't want Fervor, you might be wanting to pick up Warlords Bloodlust for the ADC generic. Now, crit strikes heal you for 15% of the damage dealt, and they will grant you 20% attack speed for 4 seconds, and this has a 2-second cooldown on it, so you can't just keep doing it repetitively. But you will get those little bursts. Now this is really good for high crit chance builds if you're not going to actually probably build any lifesteal right away. The only problem I have with Bloodlust is you don't get a lot of effective use out of this for at least the first solid 15 to 25 minutes, because you typically don't have crit. Therefore, this does nothing for you. For sure, Fervor of Battle will do a lot more for you because you can always deal this and always stack and always have extra damage. So in theory, this is much better early, and then I don't want to say that Bloodlust is better late. It's really not. It's just a different venue that can be good for full crit champions, but not necessary because once again, 80 damage fully stacked on top of the crit you already have means those crits are going to be absolutely enormous. So they're both good, but for safety's sake, Fervor of Battle's more consistent. And I'll talk about Deathfire Touch in just a second when we go to the next ADC page. When it comes to your cunning tree, you're going to be taking Savagery, you're going to be taking Secret Stash, you're going to want Merciless, and then you're going to want Dangerous Game. And that's going to round you out very nicely as an ADC generic. For the other ADC page that I have, it's ADC Graves and Draven. Now the reason why we're going to be doing the Graves and Draven page is because they're a little bit different when it comes to carries. So granted, not completely different. Everything is exactly the same on both sides, except for the very bottom down here in Ferocity. We're going to be taking Death, Fire, Touch. Now, your damaging abilities cause enemy champions to take 6 plus 50% of your bonus attack damage and 20% of your ability power in magic damage over 3 seconds. Area of effect and damage things are reduced, obviously, or only for 1.5 seconds. But the reason why this is important is because Graves is an up close and burst champion, and his abilities, such as his new autos and all that, are going to be incredibly impactful. The other reason why this is used for Draven for now is because your Q is technically an ability, and you're going to be getting more damage from it. For now, we're going to leave these two here, and we're going to be using this for them. The only carry I don't have a page for in the bot lane right now would be Corky. He's just a little bit different, and I'm not prepared to put a full page forward. Look for either a build and guide of some kind to Corky, and we'll have an updated page for him there. The next page we're going to talk about is for support champions who are healers, so support healers naturally. We're going to go ahead and ignore the first tree. We're going to go ahead and dive straight into Cunning for our first things we want to look at. We're going to be taking Wanderer. Out of movement speed, or out of combat movement speed is always good for warding and getting around the map and getting into position. We're going to be taking the Secret Stash. Once again, biscuits are better. The Meditation will give us more mana, regeneration, which is always good as support to have those in critical moments. We're going to be taking Bandit because we want to get more gold accumulation, which is always helpful. We will then be taking Intelligence. Now, some people will be jumping between the two of these on which one is better. I like Intelligence just because having some cooldown reduction is good, and as much as this does increase the max cooldown reduction cap to 45, which some people are currently screaming their heads off saying that this is amazing, that's not the reason why, but if you do get to that point, you then benefit a little bit more from it. Mostly, 5% cooldown reduction actually on a support is actually really helpful early on. And then as for our last pick, we're going to be going into Windspeaker's Blessing. Your heals and shields are 10% stronger. Once again, you're a healing support, you're going to want this point. Then, in our Resolve tree, we're going to be picking up the Recovery. Mana per 5, or health per 5, I mean, is a very good stat. In fact, just in general, for all the future pages I talk about, when we pick a lot of points into Recovery, one of the first things Riot goes to when they go to nerf a champion who is too strong, they nerf their health regen per 5 seconds is usually the first thing they go to. The reason for this is it takes power out of them in the lane because they won't be able to survive as long and become as strong. So health per 5 is actually a really, really strong base stat early on in the game, and it's just good to have. So we're going to be taking that on a lot of champions for their mastery pages. Then we're going to be taking Explorer. Movement speed, obviously, in bushes and in the river for support is fantastic. We want that, once again, warding, getting into position, getting around the map. We do that as a support. Then we like to take Veteran Scars. 4% total health is good. Obviously, 1.6% bonus to all shields and healing on you is a good thing if you are healing support. So for someone like Sona or Nami, you actually probably would take this, but for other healers where you're not going to be affecting yourself as much and you're giving out heals, Soraka doesn't care about that, and she'd rather have the bonus total health. This obviously is the big one for the support healer. You can pick which one of these you want. Right now, I just have it over here. It would be over here though if I'm playing Sona or Alistar. Actually, Alistar might like the total health though, honestly, even though he can heal himself. But for champions like Sona and for Nami, you're gonna want runic armor. So be careful of which one you have, maybe make a second page and maybe label them specifically if you're not gonna jump in and change it. And then finally, we want Insight. Your summer spells have 15% reduced cooldown. Honestly, just really good. This one, Perseverance, I know some people are like, but this is more healing, this is more awesome. It's not terrible, but if you're below 20% health, it's not the best. You're usually at that point going to be basically dead in a split second, or you're running for your life. I know that this sounds great, but as supports who don't have tons of health, not actually as important on them. So we're going to be getting the cooldown reduction on this instead. Moving on, we'll look at the support tank tree. Obviously, this is your beefy supports. We got your Leonas, and we got your Threshes, and we got other tanky people in the bot lane. We're going to be taking Wanderer. We're going to be taking Secret Stash, Meditation, and Bandit. That's the same beginning as the other page, but we're going to stop there and move on to Resolve. We're going to be taking the health per 5. We're going to be taking Explorer, Veteran Scars for the total health. We're going to be picking up Perseverance, because on them, having this extra health regeneration when you are below the 20% health is more impactful on them. Also, they have more health in general, which will have a better effect in the long run when this is active. And then also, typically, a support tank they're actually in the fight tanking. So they will at a point become below 20% for 20% health trying to survive. So that's why you'll want it on them. Then we're going to be picking up Swiftness, which is going to give us the tenacity that we're basically losing off Merc Treads and picking it up here. So we get 15% tenacity. And then finally, we're going to be picking up Bond of Stone. And Bond of Stone is the reduced damage, and you'll be soaking up damage when the champions close to you are getting dealt some of it. You'll be picking it up. So it's awesome. It's really good, and you want it. So we're going to be taking it. Next, we'll move on to our AD Jungle page. AD Jungle page is going to consist of Fury, Double-Edged Sword. The reason we take Double-Edged Sword in an AD Jungle page is an AD Jungler is typically aggressive. They will be making ganks, and they will want to make impactful plays. To make an impactful play, you usually have to be, I don't want to say greedy, but you need to bring damage because it's important to get the kill to be impactful. So we want the increased damage. Also, we get 3% of it, and we only take 1.5% increased damage because of it. So your Lee Sins, your Pantheons, your Yees, anybody who wants to gank, you're going to be taking Double-Edged Sword. Obviously, the safer route would be Feast. If you're not comfortable with that, Feast will help you, obviously, restoring some health when you're in the jungle, but typically you have enough regen, you're in the jungle. You should be okay, honestly. If you're really bad at jungling, take Feast. But other than that, don't take it. Then we're going to be going with our natural talent. We'll be going with Oppressor because you usually bring slows, snuns, stares, taunts, all that stuff to your ganks, so you'll get the increased damage right off the bat at the beginning of the game. And then we're going to be taking the Battering Blows, and we'll be taking Death Fire Touch. Then, moving on to the Cunning Tree, we're going to be picking up Savagery. These are both impactful in different ways, but Savagery is just a little bit better in the jungle. Increased buff duration with Runic Affinity. We'll be taking Merciless, and we'll be taking Dangerous Game. Moving on to our AP junglers, we're going to be taking our Sorcery for the increased ability power and spell damage. We'll be taking Double-Edged Sword once again to be impactful with our damage. Once again, if you want to be safer, take Feast. Then we're going to be taking our natural talent. We'll be taking Oppressor. We will be taking Piercing Thoughts for magic penetration, and we will be taking the Deathfire Touch once again. One thing I'll cover real quick because we haven't talked about it is Vampirism. Not going to ever take it. 2% lifesteal and spell vamp. Really not that much. It's this used to be 6% or 4% way back in the day. It was a lot higher. This has only been nerfed over time and still isn't good, so I just would avoid it at all costs. Then over in the Cunning Tree, we're going to be taking the Savagery, the increased buff durations, we're going to be picking up Merciless, and then of course, Dangerous Game. Our 7th page we move on to will be our AD mid page. Granted, this could be used for an AD top laner as well if you're full damage in the top lane. So what we're going to go ahead and take is Fury, Double-Edged Sword, Natural Talent, Bounty Hunter this time, because as a carry of that type, you will probably be trying to kill everyone. You will be wanting to stack that damage because at the end of the game, you want to be blowing people up. And you may not actually have crowd control naturally or lots of it as a bursty just AD mid laner or whoever you are. You may have some, a lot of them do, but not all the time. So the increased damage will actually be slightly better here because you're playing risky anyways. That's why we took Dangerous Game. Then we will be taking the Battering Blows and then the Death Fire Touch. When you come over here to the Cunning Tree, we'll take Wanderer because the out of movement speed combat, that increase is very helpful for roaming is the reason why we want that. Then we want the Secret Stash. We will want Merciless, and we will want Dangerous Game. Moving things on to the AP mid, what we're going to do here is, once again, we're going to guide mostly down that right side of the Frosty Tree. Sorcery, Double-Edged Sword, Natural Talent, Oppressor, Piercing Thoughts, and Deathfire Touch. Then over here, it's the same thing with Cunning. It's going to be Wanderer, the Secret Stash, Merciless, and the Dangerous Game. Now, the next 2 pages we're going to talk about are actually for the same type of champions, but the quite different variations between those 2 champions, and we'll talk about that. So first one is tank top laners. So for tank top laners, Wanderer, it's going to be good. You will roam, you will get the things, it's fine, you'll like it. Honestly, Savagery is not bad, but it's not really any better. Then we want the Secret Stash, Merciless, and Dangerous Game. Outside of that, we're going to focus things mostly in Resolve. We're going to be picking up the Health per 5, very helpful. We'll be taking Tough Skin, and then we will be taking Veteran Scars for the 4% total health. And then we will be going with the Perseverance. Then we're going to be taking Swiftness, and that is obviously the tenacity we're picking up. and then we'll be taking the Bond of Stone. Pretty straightforward, really nothing crazy. Now the changes that are different are because of, and we'll talk about them, why you would take different ones on the next page, and it's actually quite different. What it is it's Tanky Top Laners Part 2. Now, if you're a tanky top laner and you actually don't mind taking some damage to lane, it's actually very, very nice. What you would do instead is you take the attack speed from Fury, you would take Feast for just the sustain in the lane. You don't want Dangerous Game, that's not good on a tank. And then you would be picking up Natural Talent, once again picking more damage and ability power, which is a good thing. And then Oppressor, because you bring snares, stuns, taunts, and all that. So getting increased damage on yourself is good. Just think of a Malphite using his ultimate. He automatically is getting 2.5% increased damage on his ultimate, plus he's already getting a little bit more damage of ability power here with Natural Talent. So this kind of can benefit you if you do like to bring a little bit of damage to the lane. The other difference over here that you could also do to the other page as well, just depending on that top laner, if you wanted to fit some of the cunning in, but you wanted these parts of Resolve, this is for a top laner who has a lot of healing effects for themselves. Somebody like Mundo, somebody like Volibear, somebody like Maokai. So what you have is the recovery. Still gonna take tough skin. You're gonna be taking runic armor. This time you're gonna get 8% bonus to all shields and healing on you. Includes the lifesteal and regeneration. So Mundo just becomes outrageous with this. Volibear's passive, Maokai's passive. Then we're gonna be taking Perseverance. We'll be taking Swiftness again. And then we'll be taking the Grasp of the Undying. Every 4 seconds in combat, your next attack against enemy champions steals life equal to 3% of your max health. The reason why you would be taking this instead of the Bond of Stone is you're a frontliner tank who goes into a fight and then continues to try to beat down on someone you're trying to get to. You are an initiation tank who also keeps initiation once you get in. Some tanks who don't do that, and the reason why you would take Stone instead is you're a tank and you initiate, and then you kind of kite back and peel. And then finally, the last page we're going to talk about is support damage. Now, we kind of made this last minute because we realized we still need this page. Granted, it doesn't affect a bunch of supports. A lot of supports would like to do damage, but they're not based around doing damage. These, for support damage, is for your Zyra, your Annie, and your Brand support mostly. Anybody who actually is going to be building damage after like 1 or 2 key support items is for this. But outside of that, those are about the only champions that really use it. You could put a few others in there if you really want to. Overall, you're going to be sticking to this side of the page when it comes to ferocity. We're going to be picking up damage. We'll take Feast. Killing unit gives us 20 health. Double-edged sword, you honestly could take it, but it's a little bit dangerous as a support damage. Although you are taking damage as support, so you're already a little bit dangerous anyways. You could justify either of these. Granted, you won't be using this all the time, but you can steal the occasional minion and get the health. Also, they naturally tend to kill minions with their abilities, so this really isn't terrible, and they end up farming a little bit too. So once again, either of these can work. Then we'll be taking Natural Talent, Oppressor, Piercing Thoughts, and the Deathfire Touch. Then obviously we'll be picking things up over here in the Cunning Tree with the Wanderer, the Secret Stash, Merciless, and then the Bandit. About the only difference between this page and an AP mid is the AP mid for sure will be taking Double-Edged Sword, and they'll be taking Dangerous Game. Other than that, about the big difference here is the fact that you're going to be a little bit safer with Feast, and you're going to be wanting to get the gold regeneration with Bandit. And that's about the only difference between a support damage builder and an AP mid. Now, if you watched my Mastery page video from last year, the one big difference, or a couple big differences you're noticing, is there's not as many pages. The reason for that is a lot of these cover multiple things for multiple champions. Hybrid's not really specifically a thing, that's why I'm a little confused on champion as Corki, which I mentioned. And then there's just not as much variation. Obviously, the variation that there is, it's for mostly individual champions now, such as Vladimir will be making a page, obviously, where he can utilize some of the self-healing. You'll tweak his page according to the champion. There will be some other changes to a few other champions. If you want to make the specifics for them, you can. But for now, this is a solid baseline for Mastery pages up front. If you have any questions, leave them for me down below in the comments. Make sure that you subscribe for future updates to builds, guides, and for just Mastery pages and other things in the future and for content. But other than that, good luck in Season 6 on the Fields of Justice.